Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans.
And my name's Robert Winters. Perhaps we've met.
And we're going to continue because there's lots of things to talk about that's happening at this time in June in our fair city.
Yeah. We, just before the break, we were talking a little bit about some of the election mechanics related things.
We talked about early voting yes.
Yeah, there were a couple of other items that were floating around. One was...
was that on this week, though, about the rewarding
I'll take just sort of a short little tag ending to there was a council order at the June 13th meeting.
Yeah, a week ago.
It was basically asking the city or the election commission to look into some sort of a reward system or some sort of a reward
for votes
to increase voter turnout. So the election commission staff actually did look into some of this.
After that fact, or
after the order.
Oh, okay.
And just to sort of find out, was this really true?
Yeah.
And it actually turns out a lot of the whereases that were part of the city council order calling for these kind of reward system were actually kind of full of bull. Not true at all, and misleading, to say the least. So it turns out, for example, there was so just to be clear what the proposal was. Right. For those who weren't excited and watching us last week, there were some places where it was either proposed or actually carried out to offer a reward. So in other words, when you vote, your name then would get placed into a lottery, and then one person...
Oh, you might win a prize. So you
might
didn't
win
actually
$20,000.
Was that Philadelphia? No.
I think I was in Los Angeles.
Oh.
So sort of some interesting and actually kind of funny aspects about this. Yeah. A proposal like this was proposed and actually put as a referendum question, I think in Arizona somewhere, and voters just wildly disapproved of the idea.
Really? Okay.
In Los Angeles, where this actually was carried out, and let me tell you a little bit more about how it was carried out.
All right.
Though there were editorials in the Los Angeles paper saying this is a lunatic idea. But then there were proponents. Now the city council order said, well, when this proposal was put into effect in this place in part of Los Angeles, voter turnout jumped from 46 to 80% or something like that. Well, people said, well, how were you able to measure that? Well, it turns out it was a particular group called Voteria who were targeting a particular constituency.
Okay.
So it was sort of a get out the vote campaign. So it wasn't really a campaign to increase voter turnout. It was a campaign to target specific voters to get out the vote, which is what everybody's been doing since the beginning of time.
Yeah, right. Get your base out.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was not public money being used. It was.
Oh, they had their own.
It was a private campaign to say if you can prove that you came out and voted and didn't hear. Well, now it's not even
I bet
clear.
that goes on a lot, like under the table in places.
But it's I think it's implicitly not even legal, and
I'm sure it isn't.
In some places, I think in Massachusetts, it's explicitly illegal.
Right.
I mean, if you say, well, if you go out and vote here, and the presumption here being you're going to vote for our guy,
right?
You come back over here, show me your receipt. That's why they don't issue receipts for voting, by the way.
Interesting.
And
just those little stickers.
Voted. Right. You give me your receipt, and I'll give you $50, right? I mean, that would be an example, a rather coarse example of using money to increase voter turnout. Yeah. So there are reasons why laws have been passed that are very much dissuade people from doing cash for voting systems, right?
It's a bad idea.
There's good reasons, right?
Bad idea.
So it turns out it was one particular group who were targeting Latino voters in Los Angeles. Now it's a good thing if you want to get out the vote of a particular constituency. I think all the power to you. It's wonderful. It's democratic and it's great. Yeah. But the overall effect, it actually did have an effect in the election because it was a really good get out the vote technique, privately funded. Yeah. But the overall voter turnout in that election actually went down, which I found kind of funny.
Interesting. Well, maybe the other people weren't interested. Maybe it was a candidate.
Well, the problem, really, the real problem is that there is just a general lack of interest in a lot of local elections, school board elections, things like that.
True. That's what you have to get
right.
more
And to me, there's something kind of wrong-headed about saying, well, let's just give people money and then somehow that'll make them care more about the elections. No, it'll make them care less about the elections, but it'll make them care more about the money. So to me, it's about as wrong-headed an idea
Because
as you
it
can
doesn't
get.
mean they're going to study the issues or anything.
Yeah.
It means it's just that they're going to go to get. And the opposite, I think we talked about this a little
Yeah.
bit. When there's a penalty for voting, which is, I know in Australia,
Right.
but it's only for countrywide. It's only for like presidential elections. It's not for locals.
There's actually a campaign in Australia right now. I
To
saw
get rid
it
of
yesterday to actually get rid of the mandatory voting.
Yeah, I mean, and again, and the argument there was that, well, then you're going to do it to avoid the penalty, but it still doesn't mean that you
Right.
educated yourself about
Yeah.
the issue. So either way, it's probably not good, although it does increase voter turnout in Australia,
Right.
at least
Well,
for presidential
yeah, but,
elections.
you know, as I said last week,
Yeah.
though, voter turnout in and
Yeah.
of itself should not be an end in itself.
Yeah.
We love it when there's high voter turnout.
Right.
You know, it makes us feel good that so many people are engaged.
Yeah.
But just, you know, artificially increasing voter turnout for
right,
just
no.
because you're you know, holding a gun to the head,
Yeah.
that's not
We
really
should
achieving
just
much
have more
anything.
civic
I think there needs to be,
classes in,
right.
in schools, you know,
Listen.
teaching people that it's your,
This
you
is
know,
what I do
be
for
involved. I know.
This is my unpaid job, is to get
Yeah.
people more interested in
I have
civic
relatives who
political
say
affairs.
that they only vote in presidential elections.
Right.
And I'm hoping they're not voting this year because
Yeah, there's actually some acronym for, but I only vote in local elections, like a Walla Walla kind of, I
Well, I
forget
just
the
don't.
term.
How can you live in a community and not care about what goes on?
You know, I think that
Or unusual.
how you vote in local elections actually probably ends up affecting your life more
Ah.
than the higher up
What
you
was the
go
famous?
in the voting.
It wasn't Tip O'Neill that said it. You always told me it was.
Well,
Think
Tip was-
locally. No, think. Oh yeah, no, it was Tip. Think globally, act locally.
That was a bumper sticker. Of course,
Okay, well-
for years I threatened to my friends I was going
Oh,
to make a
come
bumper
on.
sticker that said, think locally, act locally. Right?
All right. Well, what did he say? He said something
He said,
about local. What
he
did
said
say?
all politics is local.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All politics is local,
Yeah,
and,
and
it's
that-
where you can make a difference.
Well,
you
also
know?
but that's from the
Yeah.
government point of view. I think
Yeah.
all politics is local was really more about if you want people to vote for you, you have to sort of come to them. You have
Right.
to
Shake their hand, whatever.
get to know,
Get to know-
who their
get to know-
grandkids are, and
Right.
no matter, even if you're Speaker of the House,
Right.
all politics still is local.
Right.
You know,
It's-
even if you're
there's a
deciding
name for that
national
kind
issues.
of retail politics.
Yeah, retail is so much more effective than wholesale politics generally anyway, so.
Is wholesale
That's true.
including social media?
That's kind of a new, some of the
Yeah, I mean,
phrasing I'm
things are
using
just
predates it, right?
Crazy now.
Well, I mean,
you know?
social media does matter.
You got Twitter
Yeah.
wars going on between Trump and Elizabeth Warren and
Right.
Hillary's in on it and like
Oh,
what?
yeah.
You know,
I know,
mean,
I know, I
come on.
know.
Of course, they're not.
And
actually
then,
doing
and now,
it.
and Elizabeth Warren is now our local junkyard dog.
I know.
Right? You know, I'm sort of, I mean, not that I think this is a good practice,
I
but I
know.
have to say I am entertained by
Well, for the first
Elizabeth
time,
Warren
I
tweets.
got an email from her in support, to give money to Hillary. That's the first one.
Ah, all right.
So
We're getting
she's-
somewhere.
yeah,
We're getting somewhere. Now, another elections-related matter that came up for the city council last night.
Yes.
In a city council
was
order.
this the finance?
Yeah, it has to do with the idea about publicly financed elections.
Municipal elections here. but-
Specifically municipal
Municipal,
elections.
right.
Now, this is not the first time this was introduced.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't double check this, but an order which was, for all intents and purposes, the same order of this
Mm-hmm.
was introduced, I believe, 2 years ago or a year and a
Yeah.
half ago.
It's from Craig Kelly?
No, Councilor Madsen, but it didn't go anywhere.
Oh, okay.
I think it went to government operations and it just didn't move.
Hmm.
Nobody acted on it. I spoke on it
You did?
at the time. In a
What did
minute,
you
I'll tell you
tell us what
specifically
you
what
said.
my concerns were.
Okay.
But the order that came in at last night's meeting had a bunch of, I mean, sort of getting entertained by the whereases.
Yeah.
All right, so it's one thing if you want to say, well, we, as a city council, we believe that if the time is right to look into, taxpayer-funded municipal elections or some other kind of limitations on spending or whatever, right? Okay, fair game, right? Whether you agree or not, it's sort of a fair thing to come in. So, but what comes in is an order that says, whereas, and
This is
lists-
it. This is, oh no, I'm sorry. This is
it
not
lists
the
some
order.
specific things, basically saying, whereas Massachusetts voters in 2002 overwhelmingly or a large
Oh, yeah.
majority approved of this, Well, it turns out that's not true. What was true, and the order was amended thanks to
Right.
Councilor Kelly.
Right, here it is, right, in yeah, it's all
so
here, the order.
so I haven't seen the updated version, but I was there at the meeting. Turns out in 1998, at sort of a first blush kind of response,
Right.
voters in
Approved by
Massachusetts
margin,
did
2-1.
approve
Yeah,
a clean elections law.
right.
And then there were some modifications or amendments from the legislature, but then it came back as a ballot question in 2002, and at that time, the voters of Massachusetts voted
Down.
against it,
Right.
rather by a significant margin.
Except for the Cambridge people.
Except in Cambridge, it was a smaller, like a 50 and
54%,
change.
59, something like that.
Yeah, in Cambridge specifically said, yeah, but we're okay with it. So,
Okay.
now that was specific to statewide elections. It wasn't about municipal elections, but
Right.
but the original order basically was saying, oh, everybody in Massachusetts loves the idea, and actually that's not a fair statement.
Well, in other words, it would be taxpayer funded?
Taxpayer funded, yeah. Now, usually the way this works is that there's strings attached, meaning if the state is going to give you money to
You
conduct
can
your
also raise
campaign.
money.
Yeah, or else
Or
you
you have
have.
a cap on what you
Yeah,
raise.
you have to get at least, 75 or $110 minimum donations to
Okay.
just to get your foot in the door.
Right.
And then you also agreed not to spend your own money on the campaign or
Right.
something like that,
Right,
right?
right.
So there are some strings attached.
Right.
And some conditions for doing this. In other words, you can't just be, lunatic Joe who's gets
Right.
50 signatures.
But it doesn't apply to everybody. You have to opt into this, right? Just like in the
Yeah,
presidential. I
right.
think McCain opted into it and Obama didn't.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So there are
So-
some good reasons why people might not opt
Yeah.
into this. So,
Right, but
but the
Yeah.
thing about it is that
Yeah.
there is a presumption when you talk about
Yeah.
publicly funded. Now, by the way, the matter was amended.
oh
and
gosh, I couldn't even understand. And then there was an amendment to something that was a previous. It was very
I know.
crazy.
And in the end, then I think it was referred to
The,
council committees to have some.
Hold a joint meeting
A
of
joint
neighborhood and
meeting.
long-term planning and the government operations rules. And
Well,
six.
clearly, government operations is sort of
Sure.
appropriate.
Right.
What this has to do
Different
with neighborhood
models
and
for
long-term
campaigns.
planning is,
Yeah.
in fact, nothing.
All right.
So, but it's Councilor Mazza's committee. So I was joking with some of the council aides last night saying, maybe we should just get rid of the names of all the council committees and just say, this is Vice Mayor McGovern's committee.
Yeah.
It's for whatever he wants to talk about.
The
This
government's
is
on a lot of them.
Right,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I know.
these council committees, though they have names and they have advertised
But
purposes.
they have agendas, yeah.
But they're basically just the ballpark of individual councilors to do whatever the heck they please.
Yeah.
I don't think that's good government, personally, but.
I need to throw this
Right.
out because I don't know if it's ever happened. Can
Right.
you put, all right, forget the taxpayers paying for it. What about a cap on how much you can spend on election?
You
Has that ever
can't.
been raised anywhere?
At the federal level, there were limitations put on it, but they've all pretty much been thrown out by
But
Supreme
what
Court
about on
decisions.
municipal? Could we say, okay, we don't want anybody spending more than
Can't do it.
15,000?
You can say it, but you can't.
Okay,
You
all right,
cannot
that's too
constrain
bad
it.
because that's what I would like to
You could-
see.
you
A
could
cap
have-
on, let's make everybody the same playing field.
They might start by
You know.
suggesting a modest but adequate voluntary limit and then challenge people to live within it. It might be a good
And
start.
then you could see people that go
And people just
without
blow
it.
right past it.
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, you're a hypocrite, Counselor so-and-so.
Yeah, it's true.
And
It's true. See, I'd like to see that.
I think it would be a better
Because then the
place to
taxpayers
start.
are out of it. You still
Well-
have to raise money to show you're a serious candidate,
And
but you don't,
it
you know.
completely avoids all the constitutional questions, right? I think if you say it's a voluntary cap, then
Would that have, would it?
you're not obliged. And if somebody
Ah.
wants to blow right past it, they could do it. And the people say, well, I really
people
needed to.
would know that, yeah.
People would know
Okay.
it, and
All right, I
let's do
advocate
it
for
that way.
that.
I would be happy with something
But
like
that,
that.
who's going to propose that? I'm not.
That's
Nobody.
that's the
Citizen
problem.
petition.
But here's some of the particulars about the idea of municipal finance. Excuse me,
Okay.
municipally
Financed
yeah,
elections.
Right. Is that we don't do a municipal elections in Cambridge like most places.
No, we do PR.
And there are some particular
Right.
aspects of proportional representation
Right.
elections with ranked choice ballots
Yes.
and slates of candidates and things like
Right.
that are very different than most settings. And I
True.
think you need to understand. So let me just sort of draft a doomsday scenario here.
Okay.
So so the city council passes and it meets constitutional muster that we're going to have, first off, I think the voters should actually chime in on whether this should be permitted
exactly.
or not.
Okay, so let's say that everybody approves.
So let's just say everybody
Yeah.
says, okay, we're good
All
with
right.
this. Okay. What happens? Okay. In day 2, candidate X recruits 15 other candidates to run as a slate.
Okay.
And there's some modest condition like, all right, everybody's got to get 50 or 75 people to donate at least $10. Right, that's $750.
Yeah.
Pocket change, right?
Yeah.
You can do that. You basically you can get $10 from the same people for each of the 15 candidates. All right?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so you get 75 people agree to write a $10 check to 15 candidates.
Mm-hmm.
So they end up with a slate. Now they're all eligible for public finance.
Okay.
And then they just run as a big slate, basically to elect 1 or 2 of them, right? Because that's how it really works. And then they just all agree to work entirely as a slate. So basically what you've got is a publicly funded slate of candidates.
Well, what's the difference though?
Well, it's sort of, to me, at that point, since
I know.
slates are fundamentally like political parties. So do we have publicly funded Democratic parties?
But that's up for the voter to decide if they
Oh,
want to.
I don't think that a Republican voter would be obliged to fund a Democratic campaign, nor do I think a Green Party voter would be obliged to fund a Libertarian campaign.
Yeah, so?
So slates are, and groupings of candidates are fundamentally like political parties. And if it weren't for the fact that you have slates of candidates and transferable votes, this would be a strategy which would be a disaster in most any other election system, because you'd simply split your vote and you'd all lose. But in a voting system with transferable votes, you actually might increase your chance of winning more seats, all on the public dime. So I have some issues about this.
All right.
I do have some issues with this. So, now I would be pretty happy with things like voluntary limits.
I like that.
Yeah, and I think that you can make kind of a good sort of moral and ethical case.
Right.
And something, you might even find some candidates warming up to the idea because they don't like raising, $60,000, $70,000
at
either.
the federal level. I mean, people are quitting because they say half their time is spent raising money.
They don't
It's
enjoy
insane.
doing it. But, if you could get some level of unanimity
Exactly.
on a voluntary limit.
That would be very...
It's not out of the question. I think it could happen.
So would the citizens have to propose that since it's not coming from them?
Well, citizens can suggest, but if it's voluntary, it's not a law.
No, but
Right?
how does that get into the public discourse?
Why, I think I just put it into the public
Okay,
discourse.
great.
So
All right.
everyone,
I'm for
my
it.
name's Robert
Got one
Mears,
vote for me.
and
All
I've
right.
just said,
All right.
therefore it is, right?
But there must be other communities that have done this.
I don't,
I'll do some research if I have time. but-
even if it's not explicitly done, there are certain
Yeah.
communities where it's just sort of understood that if you're running for a local selectman office here and there,
Yeah.
you spend at most $10,000
Well,
or
they're
something.
not paid as well as.
And maybe they're not paid. So the notion that somebody would spend
be.
$100,000 on a local
Yeah.
campaign is just sort of
I
absurd.
think if you look at probably there'd be interesting statistic to look at maybe from 30 years ago to now,
Yeah.
how the increase in pay and maybe how much you have to
I
spend
think
to
it's
get it.
correlated because
Is it correlated?
you're willing to pay a lot more to hold on to
get
your
something
much
that's
more
lucrative.
well-paid job.
All right.
I mean, it's a fact.
All right, I'll leave that alone.
But
'cause
to me, this is
yeah.
really about reversing a bad trend.
Yes.
More so than
Yeah.
enacting a harsh law. And the other thing too is that, and
Yeah.
knock me down for saying this,
Yeah.
but Cambridge has a bit of a tradition of some pretty fringy candidates.
Fringy.
For
Oh,
municipal elections, some candidates who are there more for comedy or
Well, it's a chance to say what they feel or whatever.
act, or as we like to say, acting out, right?
Well, you're
I'm
being too
honestly, I'm being too kind, but
kind.
The notion that just because somebody can get 50 signatures, to sort of be for comic relief, that they should be therefore eligible for public financing is something I'm not particularly warm to.
Oh, right. But right now, they can get 50 signatures and be on the ballot.
Being on the ballot is one thing.
Yeah,
you
but
still
they
have
get to participate in all these debates. That's why we have to have 23 seats.
Yeah, and
But I guess that's a democracy, and that's okay.
we have to
But
find better ways of doing candidate
How about
forms.
how about more signatures? Why is it 50?
Well, it's in the charter, and it goes back to 1938 when the planning charter. It's part of
Okay.
planning charter.
But that could be amended, no?
You'd
no,
have
I
to
guess
go to
not.
the state legislature.
Well, there you go. It's like the Second Amendment.
Well,
Can we amend
all
the
right. So
Second Amendment?
all right. So here's tonight's home rule petition to the state legislature.
Oh,
Okay.
that's what it would be?
All right. Clause number 1: you should allow Cambridge to use fractional transfer in its proportional
right.
representation elections. That would be a modification of the planning charter,
Okay.
Chapter 54A of the Massachusetts General Laws, which was repealed in 1972, but it's still in effect because we're grandfathered in here. So we can't amend something that's been repealed exactly, but we can get a special act of the legislature to modify it. So as long as we're doing that, let's allow for fractional transfer of votes.
Are we doing that?
Nope,
Do we have a
we're
home rule
not.
petition?
Nope.
Oh.
But I think we maybe should do it. At least give the election commission the option of using that should they choose.
Who would have to initiate that?
We could.
We meaning the city manager or?
Yeah, us,
People.
we could do it.
Oh, it's a petition.
City council
Okay.
could,
Right.
right? I don't think that you'd want to actually then mandate that you must do it. But right now, the Cambridge Election Commission is empowered under the 1938 law
Mm-hmm.
to use any form of transfer process for ranked choice ballots that was in effect at the time of the passage of the act in 1938.
Right.
We didn't have computers, we didn't have fractional transfer then. So I would just like to add this as an option.
Wow.
It would be
I think
independent.
that's great. I mean.
It would make doing recounts far cheaper and far easier because you don't have to worry about the order of the ballots at all. And I just think it would be a great option to have available for the Election Commission to consider. All right. And while you're at
Why
it,
not propose that to the election commission?
yeah. And while we do it, let's increase the number of signatures from 50 to 100. How about that?
I think that's important.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to like drive people out from running for office, but I'm getting personally a little
Yeah.
tired of people
Same
who are
here.
just
I know.
going to run for office.
They want a soapbox.
Just because they want a soapbox.
Yeah.
To me, I want you to be at least a bit more serious about your candidacy. Speaking as a person who, as a candidate, wasn't maybe the most serious candidate, but I was serious in what I said back
Yeah.
in those days, way back when.
But you're bringing up something, 1938, and we didn't have the the computers. Just for a minute, though, I mean, this whole thing with the Second Amendment and guns, why is that so sacred? I mean, we did not have we didn't have the kind of weaponry we have now. Why can't that be amended?
I think we should have a tradition in this.
Can it be amended, number one?
The
Second
Constitution?
Amendment.
Yeah,
Well,
sure.
Why haven't we done that?
You probably don't have political support, and you'd have a hard time getting.
Muskets.
You need it.
They.
Listen. Somebody could start. You could maybe do that.
Oh, I think people probably. There's lots of
but
organizations,
look,
so clearly they haven't
I
gotten
think
anywhere.
The truth is that a constitutional amendment requires is it 3/4 of the states, and only.
Oh, it's like the ERA thing.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I mean, it's hard. It's
See,
just
you're
hard
my
to do.
you're my go-to. I don't know about this
It
stuff.
would be really hard to do.
3/4
Yeah.
of the states.
I think that's what it takes, right? You
All
have
right,
to
I'm
first.
going to do some homework because I bet all these organizations, are probably working on those kinds of initiatives.
Right, but I think you wouldn't get 3/4 of the states. I think there are a lot of states who would basically
Even
say,
if
"We'll
the
keep our
language
guns."
was proposed in such a way to say,
They'll just say you're just gnawing away, and next thing you know, you'll be
Yeah.
coming for our cap pistols.
you're right.
Yeah.
And in fact, every time there's a horrible thing that's happened, there's increased gun sales.
Yeah,
I've been reading that, and
exactly.
it's
So
scary
that's
as hell.
tough to do. But
All right.
I think in general,
Okay, but thank you for that.
right, whether you're doing
That
it at
was
the
good.
federal level, state level,
Yeah.
or municipal level, I
Yeah.
think it is good practice in government
Yes.
to periodically look at your laws and
Exactly.
ordinances and revise
Right.
them and update them.
Right.
Now,
It takes
it's hard.
work.
It's difficult to do that at the
Yep.
federal level because it's called a constitutional amendment. But
Yeah.
well, for constitutional matters, but for laws, there are some
Yeah.
things that are actually laws that just need to be updated.
know.
They're just
Right.
ridiculous.
I know.
There's some laws, like when they passed Clean Air Act, was it 1970?
Nixon.
Right, that's right. But these things
He
have to
looks
be.
so good now.
In retrospect, yeah. But there
A
are
lot of good things.
right, but 20 years later they have to
Yeah.
be reauthorized. Even the Civil Rights Act had to be reauthorized.
Oh,
So
well, it was like the assault ban lapsed in '04.
you know,
And they didn't re-up it.
I like the idea of having laws, not
Yeah.
constitutions, but laws that
They have to be revisited.
have a bit of a sunset clause. So
Right.
you have to reconsider them. You're forced
Exactly.
to reconsider them periodically.
Right.
So, you know, in terms of how we do elections, I think we should reconsider that periodically.
Yes.
Especially in the presence of newer technologies, right? So for Cambridge, I would love if we could do fractional transfer in our municipal
Well,
elections.
You have this summer, I know you're teaching, but maybe you could
I'll
put
start a
this language
campaign, right?
together. All right.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll sign on for it.
You know, it's interesting when you actually ask some of the political people and election commissioners if they would be warm to think, oh yeah, we think that's a great idea.
Well, why aren't
But,
they?
You know, this is inertia problem. You know.
Well, that is true. It's like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Even because it's not really broke.
Well, the
but
other
it could
thing
be
is
better.
that
Yeah.
if you're, I mean, Council Carlone actually did
Yeah.
put in an order
Yeah.
asking to look into this. I think in May of 2013.
Okay.
But it didn't really go anywhere. But
Well, maybe it has to be
people looked
revisited again.
Well, there was some little complications that the city solicitor discovered. I discovered a few things.
Okay.
So as originally phrased, it was not really ready for prime time. But I think
see.
something could be made ready for
Right.
prime time.
Good.
But it would require a change in technically a small, tiny
Yeah.
change in the charter, right? But
Well,
but I think
it's worth going for.
I think it
Okay.
is. You know, and you know the thing is that if you're a city council, you get more attention when you put an order in for something that's flashy or where
Yeah.
people get a direct public benefit, like
Right.
free food. There was something
Well,
about
right.
free food
Next
last
week we
night.
can talk about that.
Yeah,
It's-
so you get more traction politically
Yeah.
by putting in things that
Yeah.
where involve very, very direct, tangible benefits for people or things with great emotional appeal.
Yeah.
You know, talking about the technicalities of
aren't
an
gonna-
election,
right.
you know, people just glaze over
Right,
it, you know?
exactly.
Except me, right?
Right.
So,
That's a good point. You're right.
yeah. But,
Well, we'll
but
look-
generally speaking, I just think that legislatures should look back and do custodial care of the laws
Yes.
that exist. Clean them up, fix them, mow the lawn, you know,
We
change a
certainly
few
could
words.
do that in this city because it's
Yeah.
not, you know, it's not
Yeah,
like it's.
I think we should do it. And, you know,
Wow,
and we got
okay.
we'll have a new manager, we'll have a new era,
Yeah.
everything is going to be, we'll be
All right, well,
hunky-dory.
All these
So-
things we talked about, the meetings, hearing, please go to Cambridge Civic Journal, rwinters.com, go to the
And-
city's website.
And we'll see you next week.
Yes. Bye-bye.